Live.
Hi, Angela.
Hello there.
How lovely to see you.
Nice to talk to you briefly in the warm up for this. We got into a bit of a theme of poetry, and
Yeah,
so a poem came to my mind that I thought I would share. It's I quite like this poem because it sounds also a bit like a story, and I'll see if I can do it. There is one thing in this life that you must never forget to do. If you remember this and forget everything else, there's nothing to worry about. But if you remember everything else and forget this, then you will have done nothing with your life. It's as if a king sent you to some country to perform a particular task, and you perform 100 other services, but not the one he sent you to do. So it is that humans come to this world to do particular work, and each is specific to the person. If you don't do it, it's as if a priceless Indian sword were being used to slice rotten meat. It's a golden bowl being used to boil turnips, when one filing from such a bowl could buy 100 suitable pots. It's a knife of the finest tempering being hammered into a kitchen wall to hang things on. Maybe you say, but I'm using the dagger. It's not lying idle. Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? For 1 penny, an iron nail could be bought to serve for that. Maybe you say, but I use my energies on lofty purposes. I study medicine and astronomy and jurisprudence and all the rest, and all the rest. Yes, but consider why you do these things. These are all branches of yourself. Remember instead the deep root of your being, the presence of your Lord, and give your life to the one who already owns your breath and all your moments. If you don't, you will be exactly like the man who takes the precious Indian dagger and hammers it into a wall for a peg to hang his dipper gourd. You would be wasting valuable keenness and foolishly ignoring your dignity and your purpose. Give your life to the one who already owns your breath and all your moments. That's Rumi.
beautiful. Yes,
Whatever we understand the Lord to be, it's pointing, isn't it, to this vast, mysterious beyond.
yeah. And this relativity of what is a life well spent?
Ah,
You know, people use it to accumulate vast fortunes, and people say, "Oh, that's wonderful, it's success." And other people, just make do with as little work as possible and spend all their time on their children. Which is better? It depends, right? It all depends on whether you, when you look back, think it was a time well spent and a divine purpose, perhaps. And I also see how this evolved in my lifetime. You know, what things that I thought were super, very, very important 20 years ago. And now I'm thinking, I wouldn't even spend a minute on that. What a waste of time. And does that put me in a position to judge what other people find valuable or even myself? No, of course not. It was my privilege to spend my time doing totally inane things because I needed them to find something that was more precious to me, and then something that became more precious. And where am I now? I'm just in a place. I mean, in 2 years' time, I think, oh, you know, yeah, that was then, but now I would never, you know. So it's this unfolding of what is meaningful and what's time well spent, and maybe we come to a plateau where we know we're doing the right thing, and giving time to whatever we call that beyond or the Lord. You can't go far wrong with that.
I was on holiday last week with some wonderful people, having wonderful conversation, and really enjoying life. And every night it felt to me as I was going to sleep, this was a day well lived. And it's not that I can live my life on holiday, because I can't, and I have responsibilities to do other things, but to be able to fall asleep at night and feel that you lived that day well, whatever it brought you. I think
That's really nice because, you know, when you say that you can't afford to live your life on holiday, and I'm thinking, no, that's a bit unfortunate. But when I take clients on retreats, they are like mini holidays.
yeah.
You know, I'm walking with these people, super interesting. Always, all human beings are so interesting, and I'm just on retreat with them, and all I have to do is walk with them, sit with them, eat with them, listen to them, talk to them, go for a walk with them. Like, and this always feels like a day well spent, as you say. It always feels like a great day.
And my sort of inquiry at the moment is, what's the minimum that I need to do to create a life which is like, and like you say, other things that were important to me before have just fallen away as irrelevant. And now I just want that feeling when I go to bed at night that I lived today well. It doesn't have to be that I accumulated a lot, or that I made a lot of money, or that I just, that there's peace and satisfaction, that I think there's something that for me, there's something about community, communion with other people, interaction with other people, helping other people, listening to other people, and listening to what happens between us. I think this is a real art. Like maybe this is a bit of what we're practicing here, that we don't know what we're going to talk about before we begin, and we're listening to see what happens and what wants to come through us. And any human beings can do that. When we just make space and can constantly be dropping or letting go of our own agenda, we're leaving space for whatever wants to come.
Yeah. So it ceases to be work.
Yeah.
When I was a little boy, in the town that I lived in the center, there was a little bookshop. I think it must have been a tobacconist before, because it was one of these square buildings right by the station, perfect for selling cigarettes and cigars. But it was an evangelical bookshop. And we all laughed at that. Whoever buys books there, but it was open. It was always open. So somebody was buying books there. Otherwise, you can't keep the door open and the light on. And it had a big sign on top of that small little shack. And it said, "God is love." And that never made any sense to me. I didn't know what either meant. And then you see that spending time in a useful way. I very often feel my day is very well spent when I've given it in a good way to other people, or spent a good time together. And so basically, I've loved that moment, and I've loved that person for being in that moment with me. And on holidays, that's easy. And when we can do, but we can do that at work as well. Give ourselves to others.
What's the difference then? Because on holiday we enter a space, or at least the kind of holiday that I like, which isn't, Monday we have to do this, Tuesday we have to do this, Wednesday we have to go here, but there's just letting each day happen as it happens.
Mm.
I think that's possible with work, or do we just have a model of we must be sort of working hard, or we must be suffering to some degree, or struggling with something, or it's not work?
Mm. Oh, there is that. I catch myself doing that, and it's not a busy day. So starting to find to do things in between the few engagements that I have, thinking, oh, I could write this, I could check this out, I could organize that, I could, make sure that I line this up so that I can start creating a little bit more work for the next couple of weeks on working out a project that we kind of want to do next month, but it's a bit quiet now, so let's do it now. And you could also just say, no, it's just a quiet day. Could be a day I could, spend very well doing good stuff.
And what I'm finding is key for me is that my best work comes from doing nothing. Like the inspiration and the flow comes from when I'm enjoying myself, or when I'm rested, when I'm not struggling or trying. Then things start to flow. So it's kind of the opposite of what I used to think was effective work. So there's for me, there's a whole dismantling of habits and patterns, which are about how to work, or how I work best. And it's not what I thought it was.
No.
Even the word is a bit.
Oh, yes. Well, it's got a very negative connotation, right?
It's got a heavy feeling.
Oh, yeah. And then you get this thing, it's called a break from work. Like, it's really something you need to stop. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, is it the Western push mentality instead of the making ourselves available to things, the courage of sitting still and seeing what comes towards you?
Yeah, receiving what wants to come. Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, I guess the answer is a non-dual response, a bit of both.
What do you mean? Say a bit more.
Well, you can sit still forever and expect something to happen. Then it's probably quite likely not much will happen. Or you can always be doing things, and all the things that want to happen to you arrive when you are already gone. So, you've missed them. So you find this equilibrium by giving some impulses so that other people who are doing nothing may be receiving something from you, but you also make yourself available to receive something out of that activity of humanity. It's this balance. So contributing and receiving are, if everybody does a little of it, we can't have all do nothing or all do all the time, right? So so often you also initiate so many different projects, and they give too little love and time to each project on its own. So we get mediocre results instead of the audacity of the big bet on the thing that we really think makes a difference. Say, do that.
Yeah.
Do it really well.
Yeah,
Become a master of it. make
yeah,
it beautiful, right?
yeah.
I mean, that's what an artist does, right? A
I
real
was,
artist, you know.
I was just going to say exactly that. That's. Um, I really love to see the span of an artist's life's work. You know, like some artists, they will work on a theme the whole life. They're working on this one thing, and they paint it, or they draw it, or they sketch it, or they think about it over and 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 over again. Like they're exploring this one thing, and then what can the result, even the results on the way are amazing, but the result at the end of it is absolutely magnificent, instead of this fractured, scattered, all over the place thing.
And so, in a way, your poem is kind of proposing that we treat our lives as an artwork, as artworks, right? To really perfect it and look at it. If it's a painting, look at this painting every day and how we want to embellish it and improve it, and what color is missing and what complexity, and how we can make the observer be truly joyful when they look at it. And first of all, ourselves, when we look at that canvas so far, are we in the process of making an amazingly beautiful canvas, or is it a bit of a slapdash kindergarten activity that could really be lifted to a different level?
Yeah, well, we're also a living work of art, you know, breath by breath. So for people who just joined this, there was a poem at the very beginning of this, and one of the points it makes is to give every breath to presence, or to, the poem uses the word the Lord, to give every breath. And that, just to have the awareness of one's own breath, brings you, first of all, you know, our attention into the body and into the here and now, and out of the planning, organizing mind, or
Yeah,
worrying mind, you know.
yeah. And what a privilege.
Yeah.
This privilege that 7 billion people can be grateful and overawed by, to be alive. And I'm sure there are people in very tough circumstances, but the fact that life is an amazing phenomenon.
And it's going to end. It's going to end. So, have you heard the saying, every day above ground is a good one?
Yeah, but every day below probably too. I kind of, we had people visiting this weekend for my in-laws' 50th wedding anniversary. My brother-in-law came over, and we started talking about death, as one does. And there was, because a friend of mine lost his father. How old was he? Well, he was 77. Oh, that's very young. What's young? Well, 77. Well, I said, to me, it sounds like a good innings. He was happy to go. So if you're happy to go, you're happy to, if it's complete, if it's done, it's done, and you can die peacefully, then 77 is probably the perfect age. If you've been in a wheelchair paraplegic because you got hit by a truck 5 years before, it's probably 5 years too long. If you're full of life and full of plans, and you still want to walk around the globe by going on a pilgrimage of 2 years, and you're full of life and ready to do it, and you're 81 and you cark it in the night, it's too short, right? Because you were still full of it. So, but this perception that the quantitative number can be a measure of whether it was enough or not, it's very strange.
I also think it's an art to remember that life has an end. Like many days, I don't think about that at all. I'm unconscious of it. But
Mm.
when I am conscious of it, um, I live a bit differently.
Mm.
So I heard that in Bhutan, people as a daily practice, remember death 5 times a day, built into their rituals or their prayers or whatever, 5 times a day. And they say that if you're depressed, you need to do it more.
Yeah. But there is, I mean, the poem is also saying there is a kind of like an obligation towards yourself to use this time wisely, right? And sometimes it's tough to do that, to really use it wisely.
I think some part of it is to do with how you start the day. Like we've talked before about ritual and practices, daily practice and things. But if there's a massive difference in how I live a day, depending on whether I take some time when I'm first conscious to tune in to the most important thing for me, the core of life, to listen a while, or when I don't, and my brain starts and my mind starts, dun, 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 all these things to think about, all these things to worry about, all these things to do, hurry, 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 and off I go, and I start off on that. That's a very different day.
Yeah.
And many people that I have met who I've been very impressed by how they handle difficulties in life. The ones who have some kind of practice like that to support them seem to cope in a different way, cope better. Are drawing on a strength and a perspective which helps see you through,
Yeah. I find days they're empty. So I'm good at holidaying, but when I'm supposedly in my office here, and I've got 2 hours of work, one at 9 and one at 4, and in between I can't really go away, and I start filling this time with doing things that is very unsatisfying, and I get worried. And there's this saying, if you want something done, ask a busy man. I often find that when I have a day where I've got 6 engagements in a day, I managed to write a proposal, even though it seemed impossible on paper, right? And on the day where I've got these 6 empty hours, I don't even walk my dog.
Poor dog. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So it's
But this is what I think is so beautiful about a day that is broken up. Broken up's not the right word. Framed with moments that remind me of something beautiful, or that life is short, or whatever. And those things I've experienced with other people. Being with other people, living in community with other people, having, for a while, I lived in a kind of a monastic community, and the most lovely thing was at midday there was a very short prayer at 12 o'clock, which had been designed that you could say the prayer in the time that it took for a kettle to boil. So you could put the kettle on for a cup of tea, go and say this prayer, and then the kettle was done, and you can make your cup of tea. But then after that prayer was an hour of silence. So that meant that people living together were not chatting or talking in that hour, and that hour was a great time to read. So not sit on your computer, do email, but to read something that expands you or lifts you or deepens you in some way,
yeah.
Nowadays, I think many of us have been caught in punctuating our day with, well, I'll just check Facebook again. And it's a sort of a wasting of time. For me, it's wasting of time.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to, can you curate the information that you get on these platforms well enough? Of course, if you're watching this, you've made a very sensible choice. But Mm. Look,
Yeah,
look no, look no further. Don't consult your Facebook anymore. Just watch this. But yeah, and it's really difficult there, but because I don't have social media, but then there's every now and then this knee jerk, or maybe I should check my email, and you really have to stop yourself. Why? I did it this morning. I've got the day off. How what could possibly be so important that I need to know today that can't be dealt with tomorrow? And if a relative dies, or my child is in hospital, God forbid, somebody will make me find out. They won't send me an email about that. And yeah,
you
it's
know,
still
I think it comes down to kind of the skill of being able to be in a moment where you don't know what's happening. You know, where you just let yourself feel the the space, the moment where you're not doing things and you're not planning and you're not working and you're not, but just to, what happens in those moments. Sometimes we avoid it because we don't want to feel unpleasant feelings. We don't want to feel what's actually wants to come up. We're having a reaction to something and we don't want to experience it. So we distract ourselves. So then we need to learn, have some tools to, if it's uncomfortable, to breathe with it or to move the body or whatever. Yeah. We live so much in our heads, so many of us.
yes, yeah, and this also in this dialogue, I when you stop talking, I have to say something because otherwise there might be a silence that anyone who's watching might enjoy, right?
There was some interesting experience about radio. Somebody wanted to do a radio of silence, and the radio station just completely freaked out. That not even a minute of silence could be allowed. Yet when I settle into it, it's very comfortable, the silence. It's very relaxing that I don't have to fill it or answer you or come up with something just for the sake of it.
Spill the beans on my family home when I'd already left that home for I don't know a long time, 15 years or something. But I'd been gone for a long time, and I know that my parents they struggle with quiet to the point that they even used to leave the radio on for the cat because the cat wouldn't like to be alone. I don't know what cat scientist advised them to do that, but okay. Then one day I don't have a radio in my house, so I like my whole house to be very quiet. I just like to hear the chatter of children entering the house, or my wife singing, or playing the piano, or whatever, cooking going on, whatever it is. So I go to my parents, and I'm quite tired, and we sit, and we have coffee, and it's all lovely, lovely, lovely. But I'm going to the toilet, and there's an unconscious expectation that I will have a couple of moments of silence. So I walk into the toilet. It's nice and quiet. I pull the light cord. The light comes on, and the radio starts playing. I'm like, what is going on? So I go out of the toilet. Say, what have you done? The radio's on in the bathroom, in the toilet. Why? Oh yeah, well, your father connected it to the light switch, so you don't have to turn it on. But the question is, how do I turn it off? Turn the light off. Yeah, but then I can't be in the toilet. So I had to climb into the cupboard where they connected the radio to the ceiling, and there was a button 8 feet high. You could turn it off. And they really looked at me. Why is this guy getting so upset about a little bit of, nothing is wrong music. A little bit of elevated music, totally inane. Nobody gives a shit about this music. If it's never played again, nobody will notice. But somebody thinks it's a good idea to put it on the radio channel so you can have it in the background when you are in the lift or in the toilet at your parents.
You know, I was walking along a street yesterday, and there was music playing, and I recognised the song that was playing. And I walked a bit further past another couple of shops, and the same music was playing. And that's funny. How do they? This song seems to be. Where am I hearing it? Maybe it's where am I hearing? So I started to look around, and basically they had wired up the whole street with a speaker above every shop, so that as you're walking down the street, it's like this song is playing all the time outside into the street, along the whole street. So it's not only now that you go into the shop and there's music, but there's now also music in the street.
Crazy.
And it seemed to me that the whole town was like this. And this is a town that's, old and attractive and beautiful because it's old. But everything that's been pumped into the street is like music that's been made in the last 30 years. It's like odd.
Occasionally, I haven't seen it here, but occasionally in the Netherlands, there were like old pubs, that my grandparents used to go to in the old days, that just sold beer and wine and Dutch gin and stale old coffee, and that was about it. And they had a billiard by the front window where you could play French billiards. And in recent years in Amsterdam, especially, you see a little sign in the window, something like "Still no music." Yeah, that's where you want to go. And of course, there's a minority of people who are interested in that. But for the people who are, it's a very clear message. Yeah, that's what I want. I just want to sit down and talk, or say nothing, but not have music in the background.
I remember when I was a kid and there would be a power cut. The power cuts were the most exciting times because everything that we normally did was interrupted. So there was no television and there was no radio and there was no lights, and we could only see one another with candlelight. And then and there were these candles that were kept only for, in fact, we only had candles for power cuts. I'm not even sure we had candles at Christmas. So there were these candles that were kept for the power cut. And then we would light them and sit together and play games, like board games. And the only time that my family played board games was in a power cut. And of course, I loved it because there was this, we were playing, we were together, we were connected in the dark with this candlelight. Because there are real treasures of all of this noise being interrupted. Like, when we go to a cathedral or a church or a monastery or something where people have been sitting in that silence for centuries, and it leaves something. There's a quality about that space which, when you step into it, if you're at all sensitive, can feel this is a different space. This is different from outside in the street.
Mm. Yeah, molded by decades or centuries even of silence and attentiveness to life, love, what do you say, the Lord, to this divine experience that we can have. And when you go into these places where sort of a stone has been polished every day, 7 times a day, they praise God. And you go there and there is something you can feel it, you can almost touch it. It's very, but maybe the Corona time now is like a power cut. It's a big old power cut, but I mean, it's really, forced people to be together more. For those of us who are happy enough to have good friends and family and enjoy being at home with them, it's really been a blessing. And maybe also for, of course, domestic violence has gone up, so that's not so nice. But for those who people who were on the verge of getting a divorce will definitely have got one now. So it clears a few things up.
No, maybe I don't know.
Oh,
I'm
they
sure
fixed it.
there'll be a lot of stories in the time to come. People, what happened to people during the Corona time, changes that happened for people. I was reading something yesterday about um, the number of people that are leaving London. You know, who worked in London in an office and then they're furloughed or only working remotely. So they've gone back to where they came from. You know, they've gone back to Northern Ireland or they've gone back to Yorkshire or to be with their family. And then the prices of accommodation in London is starting to creep down. You know, to rent somewhere, it's down not a lot, but it's an interesting turn. It's like
Yeah,
5% less expensive because suddenly people are leaving. You know, there's not the same demand.
yeah.
And
There are a lot of peripheral little housing booms across the country. Because a lot of people are saying, it now turns out that I don't have to live in London to do this job, and so I'm selling up my flat in London, and I'll buy a three-bedroom house in the place where I came from. I mean, how brilliant is that? And also much better for distribution of wealth across the country, right? Quite nice that it goes out of London. And the quality of life is poor. It's exciting to live in London. I remember that, but quality of life is not terribly high. It's hot like now in the summer. London is a horrible place. I met some people this weekend who saw we just came out of the water and they were like, "Oh, we're so glad to be out of London. It's so hot. There's nowhere to go. There's no water. The parks are full. It's humid." So
But I
yeah,
wonder what the cities will be like. You know, if this continues, or we've made a significant change because of Corona, and now people can work remotely and so on. I wonder if the cities will become emptier and less busy and less congested, and the rural areas start to become to life in a way that they haven't been. You know, it's fascinating.
yeah. I think they must become a nicer place to be because when you're there as a tourist or as a shopper, it's less busy because there's only fellow shoppers and tourists. In the evening, you go out for dinner, so they become like entertainment malls with beautiful buildings in it. And you can walk through them without the busyness of business because that's what people do at home, and they only do the nice things outside, eating and drinking and buying clothes and meeting each other and going cycling, visiting museums. Pretty, I like that idea. I might even consider going to London for an
My
outing.
I lived there when I first left school, and I was really into theatre when I was a teenager, and I did, you know, all my spare time was theatre and drama and all of that. And I imagined when I was 18, I would move to London, and it would be even more of that. That it was like the streets would be paved with opportunities. And you know that when I left home when I was 18, I finished school, and the very next day, I went out to party the night that I finished school. And the very next day, I left in a lorry because when I went out partying the night before, me and my friend, we met a guy who ran a haulage business. And he heard, you know, so you're going to London? I said, yeah, I'm going to London tomorrow. And he said, how are you going? I said, well, probably on the train. He said, well, don't go on the train. I'll arrange for you to get a ride. Just come to the whatever it was, the yard at a certain time, and when there's a lorry going to London, you can have a free ride. So my mother dropped me at this haulage place in the south of Leeds, and then I got a lift with this lorry driver. I had a fantastic journey down with this lorry driver who, it was quite late at night by the time I got there, and he didn't want to just leave me at a tube station, so he drove his massive truck down this little road where I was going to stay with my friends. and made sure that I got in at the door, took me to the door. Anyway, it wasn't paved with gold. Yeah, it was a massive shift from a city where I pretty much knew nearly everybody who was in the field that I was interested in Leeds, and I got to London and know anybody in that field. So then I was on a big detour for a few years before I picked up my path again. Yeah.
London in many people's biography. And it was exciting to be in London, I thought.
Yeah, it was super exciting. A lot of it was super exciting. I mean, I met people from all over the world and worked with people from all over the world. And but the thing that did me in was the traveling. I had an hour's commute every day to get to work and an hour's commute to get home again. And people used to smoke on the tube in those days. I mean, it was a horrendous experience. In the rush hour, no air, smoke, and crammed in with people, hot. Oh, yeah, don't miss that.
No, I didn't have smokers on the tube, but we did still have smoking in the office. Man, that was brilliant. First thing I did when I had my first job was buy an ashtray. That's amazing. You can just smoke in the office. I mean, I came from the Netherlands. We didn't do that anymore. That wasn't, you could smoke outside, but it's just, guys, I can smoke in the office. I bought myself an ashtray. Calling people.
The other thing in my first job in London was you had to have. It was when the first computers were coming in, and you couldn't have coffee next to a computer, so you had to have a 15-minute coffee break in the morning and a 15-minute coffee break in the afternoon away from your desk. That's what you were allowed, and you also had an hour at lunch. So basically, you had an hour and a half every day at your disposition, and you could put that all together and just disappear. You could just leave the office for an hour and a half. And I lived worked in the middle of London, so I'd just go swanning off every day, an hour and a half break.
The first few months I became impossible. I realized soon that I wouldn't be achieving anything if I continued this activity. But we used to go for a pint over lunch, and sometimes two every day. Yeah. I just came out of university, so I was in the drinking mood anyway. And you'd have a pint, and after a while, I was on a performance-based salary. I could make either a lot of money or absolutely nothing. I started to notice that I did very, very little after I'd had that pint, and especially after I'd had 2 pints. So very soon it stopped. But there were some people still.
But my very first job, before the one I've just mentioned, I had a job for a few weeks over the summer in a pub in Acton in London, and it was next door to the BBC. And the lunchtime opening, it opened at 11. And all these people from the BBC would come in and from 11 and be there as long as they could stay there. And there were certain people who were just, they were just drunk, going back to work drunk every day, really, really out of order drunk.
Yeah. Yeah, and now it's almost, even if you go out for lunch. At the moment, I don't feel it so much, but in the late 90s, it kind of became like if you drank over lunch, it was considered very unprofessional.
Yeah. Well, it pretty much is. It's professional. But also, people don't have breaks. They don't have lunch breaks anymore. I don't even know if that's part of people's contracts.
But one glass of wine, I mean, in Belgium, for instance, it's very, very common still. If you to go out for lunch is still quite common, and to have a glass of wine is, well, at least if you are in a position where you have a long lunch break and you're in a management position. The company I used to work for, my Belgian counterpart, went for lunch 3-4 times a week. It's less than 10 years ago. Quite normal. Not excessive lunch, just 2 courses, like a little soup and a salad and a small glass of wine. Not an English, you want a large, which is effectively almost half a bottle. like what a normal wine glass looks like, and then filled to the width of the glass, whereas at its widest, well, one glass, not two, one. I think we're not very good at that sort of measured approach, or at least I also admit I find this quite hard to be measured. I'd rather go all out. You want another drink? Oh yeah, let's have another one. That'll be nice.
Yeah.
So in the end, we're supposed to be working to enjoy ourselves, right?
Well, it's interesting that people will work hard to accumulate enough to have a retirement where they can enjoy themselves. But
Yes.
but maybe by then you're exhausted and not well and all of that. So why not why not enjoy the whole thing?
Yeah, for sure. Accumulate a little bit less and enjoy a little bit more. It's a very common phenomenon, eh? And
Yeah.
all the things that you can do now that you won't be able to do when you finally accumulate that, you've got a sore back, you're burnt out, you've got no appetite for exciting things anymore. So
Or loads of stuff you can't eat, or got to keep your cholesterol. You can't have butter anymore. You can't, yeah, live a bit.
great for for the ones you're leaving the money to, right? Thanks, Mom, for working your butt off, and we'll know how to spend it. Or you can leave it all to your dog. It could also give you a good feeling. So what's the upshot of all this then?
I think if we were to summarize what we have said over the last hour or explored, it must be about a bit more about living in the here and now, and um, and enjoying life, living well, whatever living a day well, whatever that means, whatever your circumstances are. To how can you live it well?
Yeah, and your comment about in the poem about the breath, and you said to experience presence, for those of us who struggle with words like God or divine, but okay, let's call it presence. But to experience presence, yes, to not be thinking ahead of about something that we can't control, that we don't know what it is, but presence here is like the beauty that is right in front of us, like for example, the beauty of this encounter. If I'm fully present to our encounter and the how exceptional it is that we can just spend time to exchange ideas, and me to open myself up as much as possible to the possibility of different perspectives from my own, and ideas and inspirations, is beautiful. But it requires me also to slow down and really be attentive, and not be somewhere else or worry about accumulating more money after this call. Don't worry, I'm not accumulating money. I'm broke. I'm broke. I like to keep it that way.
Yeah, it feels completely different when as soon as you started to speak just now, I experience this moment and experience you really differently. Like there is appreciation and beauty and yeah, and gratitude for just this, nothing more than this. This is good. This is enough.
It's surprisingly simple.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Let's see what we come up with another time. It was lovely to hang out with you.
Likewise, I really enjoyed, and I've got some ideas for the next one.
Hey.
So, yeah.
Okay. Have a lovely day. Enjoy your moments.
Yes, see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.